I just bought this old point and shoot camera, and over the past month, it's been a ton of fun to shoot with. But why did I spend a few $100 on this when I already have a phone that takes great pictures and I always have it on me? As the saying goes, isn't the best camera the one that you have with you? My iPhone 13 Pro takes great photos and videos, and the newer iPhones have progressed each year in terms of image quality and capabilities. Increasingly good phone cameras were the whole reason that point-and-shoot cameras died off in the first place. I mean, the newest phones these days basically come standard with a 48 megapixel sensor and a bunch of different lenses with different focal lengths to make taking pictures super easy. So this camera that does just one thing seems kind of redundant, right? Back in 2021, the only real reason I upgraded to this iPhone 13 Pro from my iPhone XS was to finally get some of the nice camera upgrades that were introduced in the Pro line of phones. It gave me a better sensor for low light photos. The infamous 0.5 ultra wide camera lens. It was the first time I was getting to have this, and a little bit better of the telephoto zoom lens. But with all of these nice upgrades came the remarkably awful image processing that iOS does for you after you take every photo, which essentially you have zero control over unless you shoot in RAW all the time. I'm talking extremely overexposed shadows, blurry weird halos that appear around people, and just awful upscaling that ruins some of my pictures. And these features can definitely help overall take better photos, but at the same time, I'm kind of fed up with the way that it makes my images look. So instead of being enticed this year to upgrade my phone to the newest one with the new camera control button and graded lenses and sensors and whatever they want to tell you, I set out to try to find a better dedicated camera. I already own and cherish a very nice Sony A7C camera that I bought a few years back. I love this camera so much, and I've taken some amazing photos and videos with it. I'm using it right now to record this video, and because it's the nicest camera I've ever owned, I find myself babying it and leaving it behind more on spontaneous trips in lieu of just bringing my phone along with me to take photos, and I only really use it in more controlled settings where I'm working on more professional projects, which for the record, I am not a professional. I just do this all for fun. Being able to swap the lenses is extremely handy, and I have some really nice little fixed lenses that help in taking amazing photos and videos, but those don't quite lend themselves to portability. Even whenever I stick the awesome compact kit lens the A7C came with, it doesn't quite fit into my pocket or hiking backpack, and it feels like it's just a bit too bulky for my preference to keep dangling around my neck for long periods of time. So I've been eyeballing the point and shoot camera market for a little while now, just hoping I would find a neat little compact shooter for pretty cheap at like a thrift store. I've actually come across quite a few really nice options that I almost sprung for at like a flea market and electronics stores, but their prices just seemed a little high for what they were. Little dated old point and shoots with pretty aging hardware, and they try to capitalize on the Y2K nostalgia lately, so I've seen a ton of really old crappy point and shoots just skyrocket in price. So one night while I was doing a deep internet researching session, I stumbled upon the Sony RX100 line. This camera looked perfect to me from the spec sheet, and pretty much every review I read was raving. And I think a lot of other people might have started finding these cameras around the same time I did, because as soon as I started checking the used market, I started seeing how quickly the prices were rising. Even as I was looking up review videos, I kept seeing more and more YouTubers start recommending these older cameras to take as point and shoots. So the RX100 line goes from 1 to 7. There's 7 different versions of it, and the newer ones are still going for $800 to over $1,000 right now, and that's just not what I want to spend on a little fun camera. I don't need the best, newest one. I finally found one for $320 on this site called Adorama. I figured I would go ahead and give that a try instead of buying one from eBay, because at least if I was buying from this reputable website, I would have a return period if it was not working correctly or if I decided against it, and they also gave me a free 90-day warranty after I bought it. I also just felt better buying it from a company rather than eBay, because I just know that there's a ton of people snapping these cameras up really cheap and flipping them for a quick buck on eBay, and I hate flippers. I'm so sorry. This camera was listed as heavy use, which I was a little wary about since they noted the condition expectations as having dings, scratches, cracks, hazy lenses, and fungus, but to my absolute surprise, this camera came to me in almost pristine condition. There's definitely a few scuffs here and there on the body, and the coating of the anti anti-reflective screen protector has started to wear off, looking pretty bad, but I can just peel that off and it will look good as new. This camera has a 28 to 100mm zoom range and a slightly articulating screen I showed here, which are two really nice features to have. Quick flash warning, there is a nice bright pop-up flash on this unit, which can be tilted up or down to be able to bounce the light off of different surfaces and create different lighting effects. Compared to my iPhone 13 Pro, this is actually a very small camera. Obviously, it's a bit thicker to accompany the zoom lens. When held next to my more professional camera, my Sony a7C, the RX100 looks tiny, which is definitely a plus considering the lens is a little bit faster and has a slightly longer focal length, considering this is the most compact zoom lens I can get for this camera. The screens are the same size, with the a7C having touch capabilities, RX100 does not, and the Mark II also does not have a viewfinder. The Mark II is the only version of this camera series that includes an external hot shoe, which can be used to fire external flashes or mount other accessories such as a Sony proprietary mic, but doing so does essentially double the size of this tiny camera. I did mention that the external anti-reflective screen protector is damaged and that I was going to peel it off, so I just wanted to go over kind of what I did. And yes, I did research and verify that this is indeed a screen protector that is okay to be removed. Essentially, I used a craft blade and some tweezers to lift up a corner of this protector and start to peel it off. Sony installed these plastic anti-reflective layers over their glass screens on a few of their camera models in this era, and over time they started to wear off and really show scratches very easily. This one has been on here for a little over 12 years and it was incredibly tough to peel off, but you can already tell the difference. This did take a lot of time and patience. I had to very carefully wiggle the screen protector off because I felt like I was really going to rip the screen assembly off. I had a death grip on this camera. After I peeled it off, it really made a difference. Look at how clean it is. Sony probably didn't intend on this layer being removed, but I'm definitely glad that I was able to, because now I can just pop a new glass screen protector on and essentially have a brand new screen. The new glass protector might be a little bit more reflective, but I'll take that over what it used to look like. The camera powers on and extends its lens at a pretty reasonable rate, so if I need to whip it out of my pocket and take a quick pic, I can do that in just a couple of seconds and get a really good result. Here's the first time I kind of took this camera out, just testing out the zoom, the focus, and being able to snap pictures in bright light. Here's a look at the reflection from that new glass screen protector. Like I said, it's not perfect, but again, better than what it used to look like. The control with smartphone function of this camera uses Wi-Fi and still works pretty well compared to the newer cameras. Using the current Sony Image Edge mobile app, I can connect to the camera with a bunch of different ways. I'm going to use NFC to just tap my phone to the bottom of the camera, which initiates a pair without having to type in the long Wi-Fi password. After a few seconds, we'll let you connect and control the camera straight from the app. It really only gives you a couple of options to change, such as the self-timer, zoom length, and a few other camera modes, but it works pretty reliably, although just a little bit laggy. It gets the job done just in case I need to set up a self-timer and remotely shoot in a pinch. Here I am testing it out at the lake just to try to get a picture of me in the sunset. I would say that it turned out pretty good. However, I just somehow could not figure out how to get HDR to work, but that's okay. The picture still looked great. While looking for accessories, I actually stumbled upon this used $4 case made specifically for the RX100, and I ended up ordering it because for $4, I mean, why not? I feel like I can't even go to the thrift store and find something for that cheap, so for it to be shipped to my house for $4 flat, I really couldn't ask for much more. Even though it's a bit used with a bunch of scuffs and, you know, it isn't in the perfect condition, I just bought this to be able to throw my camera into my bag, my backpack, and not worry about it getting scuffed or bumped up while I'm traveling, and that's exactly what it's going to do. It simply screws onto the mount on the bottom of the camera and adds just barely any weight or size and actually helps with a little bit of the grip. And I can add a more robust camera strap that goes around my neck using the 2 loops on each side. The case adds quite a bit of texture in such a small form, making it a bit easier to hold the camera, and when I carry the camera around my neck, I can honestly barely feel it. Again, this thing is very tiny. The only qualm I have is that you can't access the battery or SD card. Overall, this is a super nice case, so if you can find one for your RX100, then go for it. This camera has a pretty nice HDR photo option, although as soon as you take a photo, it does temporarily disable you from using the camera at all while it processes the 3 images and puts them together. When compared to HDR photos from my phone, the colors I would say are a bit more accurate and they don't feel quite as washed out. The dynamic range from the RX100 definitely looks a little bit more cinematic, especially if you use it in the correct setting. However, I have noticed that the composite JPEGs crush the highlights and shadows. You can really tell whenever I zoom into my forehead here, this outline blob of pixels. The onboard image processing is just not that powerful, especially compared to an iPhone in this regard, because this does not look that great. Waiting for the camera to finish processing those images is quite a hindrance, and it's really frustrating when you forget to turn off the HDR function because you are completely locked out from doing anything on the camera until those are done. This camera has somewhat decent macro capabilities, being able to focus on subjects as close as 5 centimeters or about 2 inches. I can get some fairly clear close-ups of scenery. The sharpness of the image does drop off pretty dramatically the closer you get, which I don't really mind because it does give the images a bit more of a dreamy look. You can definitely tell on this figurine where the edges are pretty blurry. I love a good close-up shot, and I think overall this camera does a pretty good job at those. The autofocus on this camera is pretty good. I have had a few instances where I've missed focusing on a moving subject though, and it is a little disappointing to snap the picture and look back and realize it's just completely out of focus, but otherwise it's pretty fast and sharp. JPEGs out of this camera look pretty good on their own. All the images I've shown up until now have been straight from the camera, but shooting raw images is one of the strengths this camera has. You can recover so much light detail, a ton of extra flexibility when it comes to adjusting color and lighting. I took a bunch of these photos on a very vibrant sunset hike, and you can really tell how much color I was able to pull back up. I will say that anything shot at ISO 800 or above kind of becomes a grainy mess, and you can really tell even when you're messing with the raw image files that there's just not much to recover detail-wise. Although my iPhone 13 Pro does take raw images, they just are still not on the same level of usefulness as they are from a camera with a larger sensor like this. And honestly, the 1-inch sensor of the RX100 Mark II is just the star of the show. It's the whole reason why I bought this camera. It is such a good sensor for such a small compact size. And relatively, it blows all 3 sensors of the iPhone 13 Pro out of the water. There is just zero competition. And you could really see that in this comparison right here. I have 2 images of my analog pocket, one with my RX100, which I shot in RAW and tried to get as close as I could to the color profile of the iPhone. The details that the RX100 picks up are just delicious. I mean, don't you want to lick this D-pad? The texture of the handheld is super clear. You can almost see the individual pixels of the screen shimmering in the sunlight. The overall image is just so crisp in the parts that are in focus. Switch over to the iPhone and this is a mess. I mean, I don't know what happened here. I mean, look, there's no detail in the D-pad. All of the lines look jagged and over-sharpened. The highlight is super blown out. There's just such a lack of detail. It looks like it tried to over-sharpen and guess what the texture of things were. And overall, that's the downfall of the iPhone cameras because the neural processing or whatever they want to call it just tries to guess instead of actually capturing real detail. Uses all of these processing algorithms to try to like generate a better image that's higher quality with less noise, and it just ends up looking so bad. The RX100 can record HD video up to 1080p using the AVC HD format. It looks okay. It's not super crisp or sharp compared to my iPhone, but I figured I would show a few clips just to kind of compare the two. When zooming in while recording video, you can definitely hear the lens working. I did not even enhance this. It's just this loud. And fully zoomed in quality is just a bit grainy. Definitely has a specific look to it, and some people might like that. This little camera is perfectly compact and super easy to whip out for quick fun pics, and I love that it has the capabilities to really be pushed to take even better high quality photos. Since I already use a Sony camera system currently, I felt that this was the best option because I was already familiar with how the menu system works and all the different settings and functions. That being said, there are definitely a few things that I kind of wish that it did better. The thing that I was disappointed with the most was definitely the zoom range. I really felt that the 100mm zoom would be good enough for a majority of the photos that I would want to take, and it really does take nice photos at 100mm. They're still very crisp. I find myself zooming all the way in and still not being able to fully frame things that are in the distance that I want. I can still zoom in a little bit digitally, but that does crop into the image quality. And I've had point and shoot cameras that are within 10 to 30 times optical zoom before, so I kind of expect it to be a little bit better than that. This lens is essentially a 3.6 times optical zoom, which, if you really think about it, isn't that much, especially when compared to the 3 times zoom of my iPhone 13 Pro, which is equivalent to about 77mm. The latest versions of the RX100, the Mark VI and the Mark VII, both have a 24 to 200mm zoom range, which is just leagues better than this one. And I really do kind of wish that I had that long of a zoom range. I've seen a lot of photos that people have posted going to concerts using those, and they are zooming all the way in from balcony seats all the way up to the artist, and you can see them very clearly. I just don't think that I can do that with this camera. And this is a camera that I do intend on taking with me to concerts and shows and places like that where I can't normally take a larger camera. Another thing is touchscreen capabilities. Pretty much all modern cameras and definitely smartphones have the ability to tap to focus. And because my Sony a7C has that ability, I find myself tapping on the screen and it just doesn't do anything. I might just be a little bit spoiled because I'm so used to doing that, but I do kind of miss that ability. The autofocus is really nice, but there are some times whenever it focuses on something too close to me or too far away and it's just not the thing that I want it to focus on. I certainly will not be using the video function for hardly anything because the results just aren't that great, especially compared to my iPhone. 1080p compared to 4K, 60 frames per second. The quality isn't that great. If I wanted to go for kind of like a home movie look, I would definitely use this. And if it was the only camera I had, I wouldn't be too disappointed with the footage, but it's not something I would definitely bring along with me if I'm intending on getting video footage. There are certainly tons of other point and shoot cameras out there that have so many more features than this one, such as longer zoom ranges, more megapixels, and may even be easier to use than this one. And Sony isn't the only camera brand that makes excellent 1-inch sensor point and shoot cameras like this, but for the price point in the 1-inch camera sensor segment, this is probably as good of a deal as I can get right now. When it comes to beginners looking at the RX100 line of cameras, it's not just going to automatically take amazing photos. If you understand how to use a camera like this, you can push it to get really good results, and you can make those results look even better with post-editing. It definitely isn't a magic camera, but it's a really good camera to learn on, especially when you compare it to a modern smartphone that does a lot of the photo composition work for you. Having this dedicated little camera is a super nice way for me to be more intentional with taking photos. And I'm excited to bring it around with me on all my travels to capture more memories. It definitely scratches my little photography itch, and it brings me back to the good old days when I brought my little point and shoot camera around everywhere with me and took pictures just for the fun of it. Hopefully this video helps anybody who's been thinking about getting a little point and shoot camera or specifically looking at the RX100 line. If you find a good deal on one of these cameras, definitely look up and see if this would fit into your lifestyle, because for me, this is perfect. This is the perfect little camera between my phone and my larger full frame camera. Definitely one of the most capable pieces of equipment for the size and price, and hopefully it can inspire people to express their photographic visions in a fun and easy way. Let me reiterate one more time, I'm not a professional, so take everything that I said lightly. This is just me having a hobby camera, and this is a really fun hobby camera. I really can't wait to throw it in my bag whenever I'm about to go somewhere cool and see all the cool pictures I can get out of it. If you made it this far, thanks for watching.